From Cali to Tally, it's time to wake up. WarChant.com is your ultimate Seminole sports source, and this is Wake Up War Chant. Now here's WarChant.com's Aslan Hudjavandi and Corey Clarke.
But now it shows in one shining moment. It's all
Wake up! What up, everybody? Welcome into Wake Up War Chant, part of the WarChant.com family. Use the promo code WarChant30 if you're not a member for 30 free days of access to the ultimate Seminole sports source. Also, follow us on social media, Wake Up War Chant. Follow War Chant on Facebook and Twitter. And, hey, subscribe to the podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel. All that stuff would be much appreciated. But first and foremost, listen to the next guy. Ira Schoffel, managing editor, joining me on today's show, filling in for Corey Clarke. Ira's been with the basketball team the entire journey this postseason, whether it's been Charlotte. Actually, Corey was in Charlotte, but you've been there the hard stuff, right? Hartford, Anaheim. Joining us from Anaheim. Ira, thanks so much, man. I know you've been super busy, but thanks for making some time to talk about the game.
Yeah, thanks, man. And, Charlotte would have been nice. But, it seems like that kind of ended in similar fashion to this one. Florida State in the ACC tournament got to the championship game, came up short, come out here to the Sweet 16, and just kind of ran out of gas. I mean, I think they just had so many things kind of mount up against them. Disappointing end. But I think, Florida State fans, I think the players and coaches, I think when they look back at this run and this team, I think people remember it was a pretty special season.
It's such a strange feeling because, before I became, part of the media, the evil media, I was a fan like most people listening to this show, and I was all in with everything. I can't remember Florida State losing a football game and feeling good about it. And I don't want to say I feel good about the way the season ended for Florida State's basketball team, but in no way am I mad. I'm not mad at anybody. I love Trent Forrest. I saw the interview you did with Terrence Mann. I just want to hug Terrence Mann and hold him in an embrace and inhale his musk and just let him know how much I appreciate him. It's a bizarre thing. I don't ever want to be complacent with not winning what matters most, but this team and the journey and what they've become, you've wrote about it, Corey's wrote about it. It's incredible that they've come this far. You lose to a number one seed like Gonzaga. I'm not mad at all. I don't hold anybody responsible. I'm not pointing fingers. It's a strange feeling to root for a team and to fall short, but to not be angry and not be disappointed. I'm disappointed in some ways, but ultimately I still love this team and I feel really good about the 2018-19 edition of Florida State basketball. Yeah, no,
I'm with you. I think most people are that way. I thought they, I think they again, played basketball the way you'd hope, the teams would play. And that didn't end at the end, even though the circumstances kind of, hurt them. And I think when you look at, the effort that they played with, Trent Forrest in the second half, as you said, I mean, I thought that was as gutsy a performance as you'll see. And, the unfortunate thing is it's not a game that, people remember heroes or those, use that phrase lightly, but, people remember those kinds of performances usually in victories. So I don't know how many people are going to remember. I don't know how history is going to treat that second half for Trent Forrest, but I think everybody that watched it was, a little bit in awe. I mean, he put Florida State on his back and got them back in the game, got it down to a 4-point game. Of all the baskets he made and all the big plays he made, the most amazing play to me was there was a turnover down in front of the basket Florida State was shooting at, down on the baseline. Gonzaga gets an outlet, and Trent Forrest, who's not the fastest dude on Florida State's team, and he's playing on a bad wheel, hawks the guy down and blocks it at the rim. I mean, that was unbelievable. It's one of those plays, again, if you win that game, I mean, he's all up on one shining moment, but now that they lost it, I don't know, does all that get lost a little bit in the shuffle?
Speaking of baseline, do we know what happened on that Anthony Polite play where it was a turnover? And I was watching it at a local establishment, and the audio was fairly low, and there was no closed captioning on. But that sequence, is there an explanation? I know Jim Lamar, friend of the program, tweeted about it. I have no idea what the ruling on that was. It was like a football play where you run out of bounds and you're the first guy to touch it, and you're not allowed to do that. But we weren't playing football on Thursday night in Anaheim.
Yeah, it was weird. It looked like the motion that the guy was making to the bench, because Florida State's coaching staff was obviously not happy about it. Was he held up like a finger one? It was almost like he was saying you have to have 1 foot in, or he only had 1 foot in, like you have to establish possession with 2 feet in. I don't have the rule book in front of me, but he definitely held up to number one. But again, I mean, I'm not saying that Florida State should have won the game or that the officials cost them the game. But it just seemed like every situation like that one kind of went against them. I mean, and that, again, that was one where I don't know how many times that referees are looking at that, but that guy certainly was in that moment, and it was a huge turnover. And Florida State, they just, and Leonard talked about it in the second half. Their really approach was, especially late in the second half, was trying to get to the free throw line because they wanted to try to score and stop the clock. But they drove to the basket, never got a foul call. And again, you'd have to go back and watch it and see whether or not those were all legitimate no calls. But they just could not get a call. And it just seemed like that kind of game, whenever that they had a chance, or you thought they'd have a chance maybe to get over the hump, just something didn't go their way.
You and I talked about it on Wednesday. We both felt, I felt pretty confident Florida State was going to be able to get past Gonzaga, and then there was going to be greener pastures waiting them afterwards. I think you thought as well that Florida State probably had a good chance to beat Gonzaga and probably would win that game. And then later on Wednesday night, early Thursday morning, Corey and I recorded the show, and Corey was pretty firm in his belief that just simply Florida State was not going to be able, without Phil Kofer and David Nichols, to do what they've done for the last 3 months this entire season and being successful and throwing bodies and waves at teams, and that he felt Gonzaga was ultimately going to win this game. Is that ultimately what you think was the deciding factor, is that Florida State just couldn't be who they've been because they didn't have the bodies and the depth that they've used to their advantage here for this entire season pretty much?
Yeah, I mean, as much as I hate to admit it, I think Corey was right. I mean, and he and I were texting a little bit yesterday, and also, I heard what he said on Wake Up. Just saying that it was going to be a lot to ask of guys like Raquan Gray and Devin Vassell, to step up, and Anthony Polite to step up the way they did last week against Murray State. I mean, they outclassed Murray State, so it was a little bit easier for them to do that across the board. Now you go again, play against the number one seed in the country. It's a lot to ask those younger guys, and really all of them struggled. Raquan Gray really struggled. Devin, wasn't great. Polite wasn't great. It was just a big ask, and those guys hadn't been in those roles before. So from a silver lining or a positive standpoint, I guess you would say it's a good experience for those guys. But yeah, I think that the overriding emotion, I think, for most people inside the program, and I'm sure most fans, is, man, if you had Phil Kofer, if you had David Nichols, if Trent Forrest had been healthy all season, this is a team that really could have been a Final Four type team. But that's the luck of the draw. I mean, the team that, the teams that win it all, usually a lot of times are teams that have some injury luck. I think back to in football, Florida State, the 2013 team, just a lot of things went their way in terms of, they didn't have a lot of terrible injuries to overcome. Those types of things can derail a season. It's not unique to Florida State. It happens to teams all the time.
Last week you joined us on the mean streets of Hartford. I would hope the streets of Anaheim are not as hardcore. Are you all right out there? Oh no, did we lose you, Ira? I'm here.
Oh,
thank God. I was worried, man. I just want to make sure you're all right out there. I know Anaheim can be a little rough, right?
I don't think I'm going to get shanked in Anaheim, but the reception's not great.
I got you. All right, we'll try to get you out of here then. I mean, I guess big picture. Actually, I don't even go big picture. Just what was the feeling like this game, this loss, versus last year when they lost to Michigan in the Elite Eight? Was there the same sense of frustration and disappointment, or do you think there's more hurt in that locker room tonight or Thursday night rather when you were in Anaheim after they fell to a number one seed in Gonzaga?
To me, this was different in the sense that it was. I think last season they felt like they had more to give. I think that they felt like if they could have got past that game, I think they felt like they were a better team than Michigan. And if they had played better, they should have won it. And if they had, they felt like they could have made the run to the championship game. This team, I think they knew they were kind of out of gas. I mean, even if, David Nichols, it's been a week now, he's still not ready to play. So it doesn't seem likely that he would have been ready with his ankle to play on Saturday. Phil Kofer wasn't going to be with the team on Saturday. So even if you somehow escaped with this win, I don't know, were you beating that Texas Tech team? So I just feel like, from two standpoints, I think there's more closure with this one. Number one, I don't know how much further they could have gone. And number two, they've overcome so many things. And, Coach Hamilton talked about it in the press conference or not the press conference, but when we got him in the hallway, the very first day of, not the first day of the season, but when they went to ACC's media days up in North Carolina at the beginning of the season, Phil Kofer, breaks his foot right before they leave to go on that trip. And it just seemed like one thing after another, and I feel like they just feel like this was this team's journey was they were just going to have to overcome things over and over and over again, and they're proud of it. But I think they finally got to, just one hill too many.
The silver lining in all this, Ira, is that you will be with us next weekend as we cover the Garnet and Gold spring football game. I can't wait.
I think that's going to keep me warm at night.
Yeah. All right, Ira, we appreciate your time, man. Folks, check out warchant.com. Fantastic coverage, wall-to-wall from Ira out there in Anaheim by his lonesome. It's incredible, man. I'm in awe of your work ethic, Ira. You're the best. I love you, man. Make a safe travel back to Tallahassee. We'll catch up with you later.
Thanks, man. Take care.
Yep. That's Ira Schoffel, managing editor of warchant.com. And I lied, everybody. Corey Clarke is also joining us now. Corey, welcome.
I apologize. I'm on my Bluetooth in my car, so I hope you can hear me okay.
Don't ever apologize for being on your show. We are all better for it.
Sure.
I spoke to Ira just about a couple things, just more macro, less granular things. I kind of want to let you talk about the game and your thoughts on it, but first, I didn't get to talk to Ira about this. It just felt like to me the game, you were right, and Ira even admitted, he's like, I hate to admit it, but Corey was right. You thought Gonzaga was going to win the game. Ira and I both thought Florida State was going to win the game. You pointed out the fact that they just didn't have the bodies and the right matchups there anymore without Phil and David Nichols not being there. But for so long in that game, it felt like Gonzaga out Florida State. Like they were pressuring the inbound. They made Florida State earn every foot moving down that floor. It seems like Florida State really didn't crank things up until the second half of the second half. Do you think ultimately it was just the fact that Florida State didn't have the numbers and the depth that they've had for so long that's allowed them to be successful, which is what was their ultimate undoing on Thursday night?
Yeah, I think that might be a little too simple an explanation for the loss necessarily, because I do think Gonzaga is really good no matter if Florida State had their whole complement. But, again, what it comes down to is you can look at Phil Kofer and David Nichols and say, okay, well, that's really only 13 or 14 points that you're missing on average. But it's not just the points. It's that 41, 42 minutes on the floor. You play whatever you play 200 minutes in a game. Well, 42 of them are coming from those two guys. Now you got to go find, okay, where are we going to get those 42 minutes from? Raquan Gray was not good. He has been very good for long stretches this season. He looked completely overmatched in that game, or nervous, or skittish, or just had a bad game. It could just be that. Sometimes you just have bad games. Same with Vassell. He had to play Anthony Polite. God love the kid. He might end up being a really good basketball player at Florida State or somewhere else, but maybe Florida State. But he's not David Nichols. And so what happens is Trent Forrest and Terrence Mann and Cabangeli are exhausted at the end of the game because they're not used to playing that many minutes. So it's all connected. You know what I mean? It's not just the points you're losing. It's the productivity down the stretch that you normally have in close games because your players are so the core guys are usually so fresh because they've gotten to to sit for long stretches. Well, they didn't get to. And, I just thought they looked a little bit exhausted, and it's a bummer, man. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that Florida State would have beaten them with a full complement of players, but the way the game played out, I can certainly make that case. Like, I think David Nichols being able to give Forrest a breather, being able to pressure the ball, also knock down shots. Cofer could have knocked down some shots because both those guys are big shot takers and makers, and you just miss that. And it was just, just a bummer. That's all. But, yeah, it kind of did actually kind of play out the way I thought it was going to play out. I think the one team that you needed to fill Cofer against just for another extra body. I mean, Kumaji got 2 fouls within 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, Cabingelli's having to play the whole first half, essentially. And, that's a tough team with those two big guys up front and the Tilly kid, for that matter. That's a good front line and to go up against when you really only have, 2.5 players because Kumaji couldn't stay on the floor.
By the way, I asked ESPN's Dallin Cuff if he wanted to come on the show and dunk on people, but he's like, no, I'm all right. So I'll spare everybody that.
Well, but I don't think he, Gonzaga's really good.
They are.
And again, I think, I think a lot of it though, and even still, Florida State had it down to 4 with the ball, with like 4 minutes left, and then Vassell, who again, if people listen to this show or read my stuff, I think that guy has a chance to be a star. But he was not good in this game. He was a detriment in this game. So was Raekwon Gray, which I think there's a chance maybe in a year or two we're writing like the feel-good stories about what they learned from a moment like this, those two guys.
Definitely.
Because, Vassell and Gray aren't supposed to be playing this many minutes in a Sweet 16 game, but they were forced to. And I think in 2 years, a year or 2 years, they'll look back on that and say, yeah, that's when the switch was flipped. That's what I always look back on. That was the driving force, the motivating factor, whatever. I do think that this game could pay huge dividends for those two guys down the road. But it's just a bummer for Terrence Mann and Kumaji and Cofer and Nichols and Savoy for those guys to go out when they didn't have the full complement of those guys that had been so good all year together.
Yeah, you've mentioned the word bummer a few times here. I asked Ira what the feeling was like in the locker room in Anaheim on Thursday night versus what it was like last season after the Michigan game, and he said that he feels like they were more at peace in Anaheim than they were last year. He feels like last year that team had the hunger and the feeling that they had more left in the tank. They had more to prove. If they could have got past that Michigan team, they probably get past Loyola. They maybe get in the national title game, and then who knows what happens. But it does feel like with what they lost, with Phil not being able to be there, with Nichols' injury, just the fact that they were in Charlotte, they made it that far in Charlotte, came back to Tallahassee, got on a plane, went to Hartford, fought those 2 hard games, come back to Tallahassee, fly out to Anaheim, play a number 1 seed. It just, even if they would have been able to make it past Gonzaga on Thursday night, that Texas Tech team looked impressive. I mean, who knows what happened? So I don't want to say that, and I was saying this to Ira as well, I don't ever want to be a guy that's happy with my team losing, but I am not mad. I am not mad at anybody on that basketball team. Disappointment, perhaps. Obviously, want to keep the season going, but that's what a lovable team. I absolutely love Trent Forrest. He might be he's like on my Mount Rushmore of all-time favorite Florida State athletes. Maybe just athletes, period. Just the way he played in that second half. I love Terrence Mann. It's hard to really walk away from this entire experience, I guess my long-winded way of saying this, of being mad or being angry at people. I know some people on message boards are complaining about things, but I'm just not that guy, man. This team tried too hard. They fought too hard. They did it the right way. They're too damn likable to be upset right now.
But I think it's more. I think there's a frustration, and I think bummer. I know I keep saying it, but to me that's like the perfect word. I don't think you could be angry that they lost. They lost to a great team. With guys that are going to be playing in the league, multiple guys. I mean, that team could win the national championship. It's just that it was such a special team and such a special season, and to have 10 guys or 11 guys that you really do depend on. And then, to me it was frustrating listening to the people broadcasting the game talk about all this advantage that Florida State has with their depth and their size, and it's like, guys, they don't. especially when Kumaji gets in foul trouble, all that disappears. They went really small. They had Terrence Mann at the 4.
Yeah.
Cabin-Gelly was having to play a ton of minutes. Gray was at the 5. Like they did some things they didn't have to do all year because of the injuries. It was just bad luck to run into that kind of obviously with Phil's father passing away and Nichols. And look, that certainly takes precedent over a basketball game. I get it. I'm just speaking in terms of a sports talk show host. That when you lose 2 of your top 6 or 7 guys and have to play that team, man, that is tough. And I think what makes the team so lovable, even in a loss like this, is, man, I thought there was a chance they might lose by 30. Just the way there was a stretch there when Gonzaga made 4 out of 5. And they were down by 11 or 12 at half. I think it got up to like 14 or 15, maybe in the second half at some point. I know it ended that way. But then Florida State just keeps chipping away. They start getting stops. Trent Forrest turns into, he's still not that guy, but he took over the game. He was scoring on almost every trip. And then all of a sudden you're a 4-point game with the ball. That team never quit. It never stopped fighting. It's just part of the program. It's part of the spirit of that group. It's just, I thought if they're healthy, I think it was a special season that could end it in Minneapolis. And that to me is the biggest bummer, is that we didn't get to see them at full strength on that stage. But still, yeah, man, there's nothing to be ashamed of at all. 29 wins. The way they played last weekend, the way they played against Gonzaga, I know they didn't play well necessarily offensively, but that was the second worst offensive performance Gonzaga had all year. And Florida State was doing it without 2 of their top 8 guys. It's just in the DNA of that team's of that program to play that kind of defense. And that's not leaving, I don't think, even with the guys that are leaving. I think that's sticking around. And, last year I think it was you're so close to the Final Four. You're so close. And I think really that means they're that close to a national championship game. And, no, they're not as good as Villanova. Villanova probably would have beaten them in a national championship game. But you never know. Angola might get hot and hit 7 threes, and all of a sudden you got a chance. That team was really close to a national championship game, certainly the Final Four. I think this team, under these circumstances, with 2 of their players out and one of their best players playing on 1 foot, kind of hit their head on the ceiling, right? So there's really nothing you can be upset about. They did give it their all. They ran into a better team on this night. It's because he didn't have the depth and he didn't shoot well. So there was nothing really unfair about the way the season ended. Maybe they didn't have to be a 4 seed, but it was a fun team to watch and a really special season. And I hope and I think that Florida State fans will always remember this team really fondly.
I agree, man. I agree. That's really well said. Do you want me to tell you what you missed out on during Pro Day on Thursday?
No, not at all. I followed it on Twitter. No, it doesn't matter to me. Have you talked about it at all?
No.
Well, then yeah, you should. Maybe you could tell the people that are listening. Well, and I'll listen too, but we'll say it's for them, not me.
Well, even Brian Burns said, somebody kept asking all the players, what was it like when you were a freshman or a sophomore watching Jalen or Dalvin or Derwin get ready for Pro Day, and Brian Burns even said, he's like, yeah, it was cool. It was really quiet, though. It was a lot more quiet today than it was those other years. I don't know why, but it just was. And I just want to be like, Brian, you're the only dude here right now. It was weird. ESPN 3 or ESPN 2 or ESPN the Ocho, it wasn't televised. I don't know how many of the 10, 12 guys that worked out, are going to be on an NFL roster. It's one of those sort of things. If you want to keep blaming Jimbo, I guess you can point and say, listen, look at this talent that's leaving, and these were your senior leaders and your draft eligible guys. Burns looked great. I think Burns is going to kill it in interviews. I think Burns is going to kill it, obviously, with his skill set and the way he measured out and tested. I don't really know who else does. I know DeMarcus Cousins said that a lot of teams like him for his run-stopping ability, but I listened to the Ryan Russillo show, and he had Mel Kiper on, and Mel Kiper said that if you're a defensive tackle and you can't rush the passer these days, there's not much of a market for you. Nooney hurt his hamstring during running routes. He apparently pulled his hamstring 3 days prior to all this. I don't know how Nooney's going to do. I don't know how he's going to market himself to teams. I don't know how well he's going to come off. Jaquez, I hope it works out for him. He just looks like a poor man's like Leonard Fournette. He looks really good. The question I want to ask Willie on Friday when we're out there at practice, I just want to ask him, what's it like when you know players that played for you make somewhat dramatic transformations, whether it's like DeMarcus Cousins and Jaquez are talking about all the weight they've dropped and how they're in the best shape of their lives. Brian Burns has gained 20 pounds since the last game Florida State played. Like, what's it like when you're a head coach and you have a strength program and you have guys on these programs and then within 90 days they transform their body? Like, are you against that? Is that not what your program was your strength program was like? Now, we don't want to make Jaquez Patrick drop weight, or we don't want to make DeMarcus Cousins play under 300 pounds, or, we don't want Brian Burns to add 20 pounds of his body. And then all of a sudden, like, they make these huge transformations. I wonder what that feels like for a guy like Willie. But ultimately, good kids.
That's all of them, though, right? That's
Yeah.
all of the college football coaches. It seems like you read about all these kids, not just at Florida State, that like a kid will put on 18 pounds before the combine, or he'll lose. More likely, he'll lose weight and run a fast. He's trying to trying to get paid, obviously, and trying to impress scouts. And it's like, well, wouldn't you want to do that in the middle of wouldn't you want to be in your best shape when you're actually playing the football games too? Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I just think that's the nature of the beast, and they are not to an extent. The reality of it is they are. That's all they're doing for 3 months is trying to train their bodies. So there is going to be some difference in between, like a college kid that's on his own. Like these guys they're Asia, especially for a Brian Burns. He's going somewhere, and all they're doing for 3 months straight, the only thing he's thinking about is getting his body right. And when you're in college, you got 1,000 things on your mind. So there is a difference. But I could get how that would be a little frustrating for a college coach to be like, oh, great, you're in the best shape of your life now? Couldn't have been 5 months ago when we were trying to beat Miami?
Yeah. Well, I just wonder, like, did they tell DeMarcus in July of last year, listen, we think it's in your best interest to drop under 300 pounds, or to tell Jaquez, like, hey, man, you're over 230 right now. We need you like 220. Or do they not think that? Like that, but he obviously won't, he's not going to disclose that, so I probably won't ask
and
him.
Also, I think some of it, too, is like, man, it's one thing to be told by your college coach, hey, you need to drop some weight so you can be a little quicker and get to the quarterback. It's another thing to be told, hey, man, the thing you've always dreamed of your whole life, getting drafted in the NFL, it all hinges on you losing this weight and showing that you can move.
Yeah.
Because, it's at the end of the day, it's on the player to do what he has to do to get ready. And I just think maybe for most of these guys, and it makes sense, I'd have been the same way too if I was in their position. When it becomes, okay, my livelihood is on the line and the thing I've dreamed about forever, I have to try to, I've got to, put all my eggs into this basket. I can understand why they get in this great shape. That maybe they wouldn't when their college coaches are telling them that.
Last thing, guess what? Brian Burns gave a shout-out to the ghost of Charles Kelly. Because I asked him, how are you marketing yourselves to teams? Are you a 4-3 defensive end, or are you a 3-4 rush end? He's like, probably I'm a 3-4 rush end. I asked him how tough will it be to play that position. He's like, it won't be that tough at all. He's like, that's what Coach Kelly had me do a lot. He's like, this past season was really the only year that I played with my hand in the ground for all the snaps. Like, but that's the way they wanted to use me, and that's fine. He's like, but I'm used to playing as a 3-4 rush end because that's what Coach Kelly liked to do a lot of the time. So look at that, man. Charles Kelly, who would have thought he's the guy that had the exotic defensive routine, and Harlan Barnett's really keeping it really, really simple and just running, cover 2 and 4-3 like it's 2005. But, hey, that's for another episode. Corey, get out of here, man. You've got a lot on the plate, man. Thanks for taking some time out and filling in or reporting to duty on such short notice, man. I appreciate it.
You don't have to thank me on my own show.
I know.
But I did want to say that it was, again, I'm going to use it again. But I was just bummed for Leonard. I was bummed for all those players. But that really was one of the more probably the most fun team that I've covered at Florida State, the most likable team. And they're all pretty likable. but just the way those guys, that group of seniors, the way they went out, just a really cool group of guys and a fun team to watch. And I do think, man, I mean, it all hinges on 25, but I think he's going to come back. He had 8 points in that game. He wasn't great. But you saw what Trent Forrest can be, even on 1 foot. That dude with Cabangeli, and another thing, real quick, MJ Walker has to take the next step. Has to. He is too talented a kid to be a liability on offense as many times as he is against good teams. He is. But there's no reason to think he can't. This was his first year starting. If he takes a sizable leap to go along with Trent Forrest, Cabangeli, Vassell, and Gray, and the guys they have coming in, including 2 7'3" guys, and Patrick Williams, who's one of the better recruits in the country.
And Malik Osborne.
They could be right. And who?
Malik Osborne, the transfer from Rice, right?
I keep forgetting him, but they really like that dude, and he is a nasty guy that can rebound, nasty in a good way. They can rebound. Man, they could be right there again next year. They really could. And I think all the stuff we said about Terrence Mann this season and what he means to be, what he means to this program and the true Seminole and all that, we're going to be seeing the exact same things about Trent Forrest next year.
Yep.
And that kid is if he can stay healthy, will be a great college basketball player. And you hope they give themselves a chance to get here again next year, maybe get a little more lucky, a little luckier in the Sweet 16 or Elite 8, and this group of guys can finally get to the Final Four. But either way, man, really fun season. It's a drag that it had to end, but I'll leave you with this: they went 16-3 in their last 19 games. All 3 losses were to number 1 seeds.
Indeed. Hey, man,
Not bad.
Tell Brady to enjoy spring break, and tell Mama Clarke we all love her.
I appreciate that, Aslan. That means a lot, and you will get to see Brady in a few days for spring break, and he's really excited to hang out with you. I don't get it. I don't quite know what's going on there with his love for you. You are his favorite host on this show. You're his godfather. That's what he keeps calling you.
Yes.
So be sure to have a free night available so we can go to dinner and you can hang out with my son.
For sure, man. He's Corey Clarke. I'm Aslan. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll catch up with y'all next week.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.